Okay, Ken.
Ken, you are muted.
Don't worry, we'll edit that part out.
Looks like you had a little bit of technical difficulty there, Javi. Give him just a minute to come back.
It's now well. Is that correct?
Now we get
Much better.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. There was some software telling me to reconnect my microphone. All right.
Don't forget to share your
And
presentation.
a check if you can see my screen.
Oh,
Yes.
alrighty. Action.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Javier. Good morning to everyone. I'm really glad to see you again. It's been a long time since I did Lunch and Learn. Javier kicked me out and I had to submit a petition to be brought back. So I'm glad that worked. But today I think we're into a topic that is very exciting, and I'm glad to see a large number, 143 people already in here. And I was listening to Javier talk, and he'd mentioned this is a safe place, right? And that's one of the things we're encouraging when we get into diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Try to create a safe place. Now, let's take a moment and reflect on what a safe place means. It really means a place where someone can make a mistake. And so the culture of showing grace, really just lean in and find out some more before we jump into conclusions. For the most part, if people make an error or say something incorrect, they didn't mean to, right? They're really just being curious. But we want to encourage curiosity. And so if we don't make it a safe place, it's really hard for people to step out of their comfort zone. So hopefully we do that today. So I want us to start first. Again, our topic today is diversity, equity, and inclusion. My name is Ken Forbin. I'm a program administrator with the Transportation Lean Office. And I have with me also Julia Foyt, who is from the Partnering Office. So the two of us will be presenting today. But I want us to level up, kind of connect. Let me find out in the poll, and Javier, if you're ready in the poll, let's try to find out what we know about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what you know about, so that we can connect the dots and begin a conversation at a point where we can all be able to converse, so have the same level of conversation. So Javier, if you have that poll up, please go to the poll using the feature located at the bottom right corner of your Google Meet screen. And you can click on to poll. I think the first question is, I have never heard of it and know nothing about it. So I've never heard of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know nothing about it. Now, the second question is, or the second option is, I have heard of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but have not had any further involvement with it. So you've never been in a Lunch and Learn, you've never watched a video, you've never been in any presentation. And the last one is, I have heard of it, and I've been involved with it in one way or the other. So choose the one that applies.
So Ken, I'm not sure if you can see the results, but it looks like we've got about 80 votes or so, and about 35 of them or so have heard of DE&I, but have not had any further involvement with it. We've got about a little over 40 that have been involved one way or the other, and then we have 10 right now that have never heard of it.
Okay. Well, why don't we start off by, please put in the chat if you have heard of it and have been involved with it in one way or the other. You can just say yes or drop in your name. If you've heard of diversity, equity, and inclusion, good. Coming up now. All right, Deborah Masahos, can you please share with the team what you know about diversity, equity and inclusion? Deborah, please.
I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Oh, okay. Well, in terms of what I know about it, it mostly comes from experience at another public agency where we were doing a lot of work. It was Oregon State University, a public university, and I was involved in a hiring initiative. And it had to do primarily with the hiring of faculty. And I was what was called a search advocate, where I was tasked with sitting on hiring panels to make sure that the hiring panels were considering all aspects of a potential hire and making sure that they were making the best decision possible.
Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to give a high-level definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and maybe an explanation, really, not a definition, because it's really referring to policies and practices that either organizations or communities take to increase representation and participation of their members, right? Some definitions go to specify that these are policies or practices that are put in place to encourage representation and participation of otherwise underrepresented groups. So they may specify otherwise underrepresented groups. But in all fairness, it's just increasing participation and representation of all groups. And that's really what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. Now, in the word diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have three words, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion. And sometimes you may hear diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging, right? So for those 35 members who haven't really heard anything about it, diversity just it suggests that we are all different. We're either different as groups or different as individuals. A good example is there's a group of us in here who are male, there's a group that's female. But we're also different as individuals, right? The concept of we have unique characteristics that make us different. I'm different from Javier. I'm different from Viju Coxon, different from maybe Sam Patton, right? And even if we looked at those who are female, we're all different. And so it's saying that because people are inherently different, it's really important that we pay attention to these differences, because our differences inform how we behave, how we complete tasks, and how we are happy about what we do, and also even how we interact with one another. Now, equity on the other part is talking about distribution of resources based on our abilities, right? So think about an organization like ADOT. If we talk about diversity and refer to our uniqueness, then there are certain things that we're not all the same about. Providing resources, exact same resources to everyone may not sufficiently meet some of our needs. A good example would be, we had a picture about people riding bicycles, but some people were not, they had some disability issues, but they were given bicycles. They weren't really given tricycles to be able to ride. Now, providing bicycles to everyone, even those who are either too little to ride or too tall to ride, but the same bicycle, you're not really helping them to perform. But if you step back and say, based on your abilities and disabilities, what kind of bicycle would you need, right? Perhaps based on your age, what kind of bicycle would you need? Based on your stature, maybe your height, what kind of bicycle would you need? If we begin to look at this from a very unique perspective, we may actually be very productive, because we will provide resources to people not based on equality, but equity, right? So the second part about equity talks about fairness in a workplace, in a community, but I'll give the case of ADA, that we are fair, that we're creating a fair working environment. Our practices are fair, our hiring are fair, promotions are fair, pay equity. Are we paying women more than men or men more than women? Should we be doing that? Is that what is happening? And so what this is saying is we should look to our organization to ensure that there's fairness. Are we treating people with respect? Now, mind you, these things are not there to suggest that every single organization has a problem. It's also not suggesting that organizations do not have a problem. It's basically saying it's a lens that you use to examine an organization's behavior and culture to verify whether these problems are happening or not. The last part that talks about inclusion, it's really about a culture. If you're an employee at ADOT, how do you feel being an employee at ADOT? Do you feel you matter? Do you feel your opinions matter? What about you when you're in your teams or your units? Are you just being tolerated, or do you feel you're an important member of the team? How do you connect with your teams? So that's really what diversity, equity, and inclusion at a very high level means, right? Now, there's more to come. We have a program, and I'm excited to share with you. Julia and I are excited to share with you what we've done so far. And so there's more to come. There's plenty of opportunities to learn about it if you haven't heard about it. And because it's a constant learning process, even if you've researched about it, there's still a lot of material that will be exciting for us to get involved with. Any questions so far before we get into the substance of today's presentation? Julia? Anyone saying they have questions? I'm looking at the chat. I'm not seeing
anything yet.
All right. Means I did a good job, or I really screwed it up that no one even figured out what I said. But I think the format was the best option. All right.
I do have one question.
Okay.
Jennifer.
Jennifer, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Ken and Julia, I was just wondering if there were additional slides after the poll question. Ken, I know you shared some really good slides yesterday, but I didn't see them. Are those going to be available to the group? And that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Julia, you want to take that question? Or I can take it.
So the information yesterday will be posted, if I'm not mistaken, on the Leaders Conference site. And then
Yes.
Ken, after your poll question, I think you have more slides, but that was just the definition you're describing now is not on your next slide, right?
It's not on the next slide, but then to Jennifer's question, we will make this available. It is going to be on the site that Julia mentioned. And I can also send it to anyone who is interested. If you reach out to Javier, I can send you some of the slides that I've presented in the past that really does cover the subject of diversity, equity, and inclusion, at least in a manner that you would understand or capture it properly. So thank you again, Jennifer, for your question. All right. If there's any other question, please keep them coming, right? We can always pivot back to make sure that we address any questions or thoughts that you have. So let me do this now. All right. So any good presenter, you always start by trying to tell your audience what you're going to say, and then say it just like you promised. So on your screen, I have an outline. And today, I want to share with you ADOT's diversity, equity, and inclusion milestone and the task timeline. So you would see me refer to the word, you'd hear me say DEI or DE&I, really acronyms for diversity, equity, and inclusion. We would also talk about ADOT's organizational structure, what that means. We would share with you ADOT's diversity, equity, and inclusion statement. And I would also share what that really means. And then we'll get to some frequently asked questions, and there will be room for us to chat back and forth just to explore this whole concept, how it plays out in ADOT, but as a concept, or even just investigate on the body of knowledge. All right. So here are the milestones. The first was, it all started in November. And in November of last year, we had a leadership conference, the agency-wide leadership conference. And at the end of that conference, there was a call to action by our director. In that conference, there was a lengthy discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion as a way of improving an organization's culture. And we had a speaker. And shortly after that, the director then called on every ADOT employee to be involved with issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because in his words, they tie perfectly well with our ADOT principles of accountability, integrity, and respect, and really helps support us to meet our true north. Based on his call to action, there was the creation of an inclusion council. And we're going to talk about the inclusion council in the subsequent slide, but that led to immediate creation of an inclusion council. Between the months of December and January of this year, the inclusion council moved on to agree on the agency diversity, equity, and inclusion approach. And this is important because diversity, equity, and inclusion is very broad. And because it's about a culture, it really has to be tailored based on the culture of the organization. In D&I, practitioners say you just cannot transplant a process from one organization to the other, because you have to pay attention to that genetic makeup, the diverse makeup, the existing culture of that organization before you proceed with any implementation of a D&I. So what the Inclusion Council did was review different strategic ways of deploying the E&I and made an agreement on what approach would be best for ADOT. That same period, the council developed a DE&I organizational structure. And so it's saying the council will be responsible for the execution of the approach, but they also created other structures that would support the implementation of the policies and procedures that the Inclusion Council will be deciding. And again, once I get to the org structure, you would understand deeply what I mean. Between the same period of December and January, the Inclusion Council then developed an agency-wide DE&I statement. We're going to share that statement with you and talk about what does it mean to have a DE&I statement. But at this point, walk with me, please. I'm just giving you a timeline of the things we've done, and then we'll do a breakdown of that as we go through slide by slide in the course of this presentation. That same period, we began recruiting members to the diversity, equity, and inclusion subcommittees. You may have received an email. You would remember the last bulletin that went out. There was first an email notifying supervisors, and then there was a formal email to all ADOT employees with a link asking you to volunteer if you were willing to be part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion program. So that's what that was. We started in the month of January. In February, this month, after having collected all the names of volunteers, we are beginning the DE&I committee kickoff meetings. So tomorrow, quite frankly, we have the data analytics team will be meeting tomorrow, and on Tuesday, the engagement committee will be meeting for their first kickoff meeting. We'll still have to schedule for the communications committee. Now, just a quick note, the Inclusion Council meets twice a month for an hour. So again, the Inclusion Council, you remember, was the first that was formed right after the call to action from the director. So based on this, what is left? We're looking at by May, or maybe let me go back here. After we do the kickoff, we would begin doing what we call the current state evaluation. And really, the best way to explain this is that when you go to the hospital, to your doctor for an annual physical examination, specific things that they look for. It doesn't matter if you're sick or not sick, but they usually will run a battery of tests based on specific health indicators. That's what we intend to do. Again, to use the DE&I lens and evaluate our organizations to see how we're performing in one thing or the other, or several of those performance measures. In May, we expect to come out with a DE&I quarterly report, clearly telling the organization how we perform with regards to DE&I and based on a series of performance measures. And we hope that report will lead to the development of a DE&I strategic plan for 2023, and that we would have some performance metrics for the next fiscal year. Any question?
So Ken, there is a question that KK has. Equity on a highway project, any thoughts?
Equity on the highway project, any thoughts? Yes. And that's a good question because, again, when you look at the way we've developed our DE&I strategy, at the very onset, we sound to be inward looking, paying more attention to our organizational culture as ADOT. But the concept of equity is now being spread beyond fairness of employees in the workplace. It's now beginning to be fairness in the distribution of projects, the identification of projects, the execution of projects. So KK, that's really where it would apply for Federal Highways Administration. I understand even the IIJA is beginning to have components asking that stakeholders demonstrate DE&I. And so, exactly. And so the issue of equity would be involved. And how does it play out? It's in the distribution of projects, construction projects. Are some rural areas getting in more than other areas? In our case, because we do a lot more rural projects for those who are in transportation division. And for people like MAC or other cities, are they distributing their projects equitably so that they are also reaching underprivileged communities? So that's how that applies in cases of equity and highway projects. Hope I answered your question, but that's a big piece that the federal government is actually asking, that stakeholders demonstrate evidence of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's right, not always easy to fulfill equity, but remember, if you observe equity in terms of cultural competency, then you would be able to fulfill equity in that sphere. Granted, the whole idea of DE&I began more from social justice issues, and so as they broaden that to include economic and even urban development, it can be a little challenging, but there is definitely an opportunity when we look at cultural competency. How do we involve the tribes when we are constructing projects that get through tribal land? How much of the tribal people were involving them in our contracts when we execute them? Those are some of the things that for the IIJA, it'd be important to at least demonstrate. Thank you for your questions, Kana. KK. All right. So moving on, and again, I don't want to be too professorial, so when you have questions, throw it in because it makes it a conversation. Getting back to my screen. Okay, there it is. Here is ADOT's diversity committee structure, so our DE&I structure. Remember, we talked about the DE&I org structure, so the organizational structure. And what this really means is, it's really, the choice was to create certain committees and subcommittees that would support the organization's DE&I program. It's called a community-based program because it really is not a top-down approach, it's an everyone approach. In fact, it would be incorrect to suggest that it's a bottom-up, because it's both ways. It's bottom-up, up, down, left, right, across. It's everyone. And so the word community is important when we sent out a little summary to demonstrate that we are looking at everyone. This is about our culture. Every single ADOT employee, it's about our culture, and every single ADOT employee has a stake in the development of an inclusive culture, a safe place, and a very innovative and progressive culture. So we have the Inclusion Council. You can see right at the top. And let me try and use maybe a pointer here. So we have our Inclusion Council. Here we have 11 members now. And their responsibility is to develop the vision, the strategy, and alignment of the DE&I program. Under the Inclusion Council, we have 3 committees. We have the Engagement Committee, and their responsibility would be on some specific problem-solving work groups. So they would lead work groups or develop work groups that would not only involve members of the committee, but members of our ADOT committee. right? So there are problem-solving opportunities. For example, if we had a problem with, say, hiring, this would be the group that will look into hiring with HR to find out if there are gaps and if they need extra hands in doing a PDCA. That subcommittee under the engagement committee would be working on that. The other subcommittee under the engagement committee is called the employee resource groups. So these are small groups and interest groups formed by employees, for employees and the organization. It's important to really specify this is really not a drinking group. It has to really be beneficial to the employee with regards to the employee's job and beneficial to the organization. And so we want to allow employees to be able to form those groups. There are procedures that will be followed. A good example has been employees who come together to improve their skill set in lean management. Not traditional lean coaches, but they found it relevant to be good in lean. And so they come together for that purpose. The other committees include the communications committee that's responsible for DE&I messaging, presentations like this. If we are going to get trainings, that would be a good example of an activity that that committee will be working on. And the last is the data analytics committee that looks at data. I've talked about really doing the current state evaluation. A lot of that would need data, research, surveys, asking employees what they think, dashboarding. It's really a way of sharing data on maybe a diverse makeup. Do you know the proportion of people by ethnicity, by gender in ADOT? At ADOT, you probably do not know. And so we want to increase transparency on things like that. Any question on the DE&I organizational structure? I did not mention the liaisons, but the idea is members of the Inclusion Council are also welcome to participate in any of the committees. Any questions?
Not seeing anything yet, Ken, but does anybody have any questions?
All right.
Think of any, please throw them in the chat. I can always answer them as well. That way Ken can keep going.
All right. Now let's look at the members. These are the members of the Inclusion Council. So we talked about the Inclusion Council. That's really typical with deployment of DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, because when you use the community-based approach, creating an Inclusion Council is important because you need a group of people who are constantly figuring out strategies for deployment, tools and techniques for managing that deployment, and for sustaining that culture, right? And so the Inclusion Council is made up of the following members you can see on your screen. I would not just call out names because it's going to take a little while. These are the members of the Engagement Committee. You can see at the bottom here, we're expecting some pictures, so we're still trying to get some pictures. So we didn't have everyone's picture up here, but these are some of our members of the the Engagement Committee. And these also are members on our Data Analysis Committee. And last, not the least, Communications Committee. So if you remember what we're presenting on our org chart, we said the Communications Committee will be responsible for outreach, programs like these, presentations, launch and learns, as well as training. Right.
So Ken, before you get too far, give me just one moment. Sorry. If someone wanted to join a committee, do we still have space?
Yes, we do. And we would cover that, but thanks for bringing up early. We are open to recruiting more members to participate. Remember, the committees have standing members, but the committees are going to be involved in community work, which is the work of all of us, 3,700 employees at ADOT. So while you may not be a full member at a committee, you would also be able to support the committee's work in terms of things like generating survey responses or doing additional performance improvement projects. So yes, we are still interested we're still collecting volunteers who are interested in the DE&I program. All right, with that, I'm going to invite my friend Jennifer Moyes to please, if you can, read ADOS DE&I statement. Let me know if you can. I didn't warn you before, but I think we're having a conversation, so may as well have that nice exchange.
Sure.
Thank
Can
you.
everybody hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. ADOT's DE&I statement. ADOT is committed to building and maintaining a culture of inclusion and belonging throughout the organization. Our true north of getting everyone safely home relies on the diverse values and perspectives of each employee brings to the agency through ADOT's core values of accountability, integrity, and respect. By demonstrating our belief in these values, we will work to ensure that together we are making our workforce diverse and our workplace inclusive.
Thank you very much, Jennifer.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions on the DE&I? Now, I see some questions in the chat, and we can talk about that, but are there any questions about ADOS DE&I statement? Now, if I can just fill in the blank space here, the DE&I statement is one of several things that when you run a DE&I program, you have a statement, and the statement is a message and a commitment to both your organization and other organizations, so both internally and externally, defining what you stand for with regards to DE&I. Again, the body of knowledge of DE&I is very broad, and so it's important for organizations to clearly state when they say DE&I, what do they mean? In the case of ADOT, it's really clear that we are involved in building and maintaining a culture of inclusion and belonging. We are also saying that we want to also use our core values of accountability, integrity, and respect. By demonstrating our belief in these values, we're sure that we're going to make it through. Two things at the bottom: workforce diversity, workplace inclusivity. So we want to make sure we get these two important. That's why KK's question was important. Was when you refer to your workforce and your workplace, are you not paying attention to what we call supplier diversity, which is our corporate responsibility as ADOT in identifying projects and execution of projects? And we are looking at that as well. All right, Julia, any questions in the chat?
So they were more about getting the form to participate. And then Kathy said something right as you were starting to say it, which is you can't practice our AIR values without incorporating and practice DEI as well. So exactly, Kathy, thank you.
Thanks a lot. All right, so moving on to the next. Let's go into frequently asked question. Frequently asked questions. At this point, please respond to the poll question using the feature located at the bottom of the right-hand corner of your Google Meet. So let's go over there and see what we have. Let's see, I have multiple screens, so I have to go over here and go to the polls. We have the second poll question. We do. Right there, it says the DE&I program at ADOT only focuses on ADOT's internal culture. Is it true or false?
So far we have almost, oh, there's 30 votes right there. Went from 20 to 30 like that. It was awesome.
All right. And so the right answer is false. We are not only looking at it internally, we are looking at it externally. And thanks to KK for bringing that question. We are also looking at how we treat our customers and our external stakeholders. And the next one is ADOT's DE&I program still needs volunteers.
We've got 40 some votes coming up on 50, and not a single person has said false. 55, all true.
That makes me happy you're listening.
Yes, it does.
And those were the three questions we had. And at this point,
we have one more, Ken.
Oh, we have one more?
ADOT's DE&I program will use surveys to obtain feedback from employees. True or
Oh,
false?
thank you. Oh, I missed that. That's why I need a co-pilot. Thank you.
Mhm.
What do you see as the results?
Everybody is saying true so far. We're
Good.
at
And so,
52. Yep.
yeah, and maybe we should spend a little time, should we, Julia, and talk about surveys and feedback here. Our response rate to surveys are not that high. In general, Ada, DE&I cannot survive without feedback from employees. Specifically about equity and inclusion and worst belonging, to know how you feel, we have to ask you. You have to tell us. And the one most scientific way of doing that is by sending out surveys. And so that's why we are opening it up for more volunteers, because we want to build advocates for survey respondents that can help us increase response rates to surveys in the agency in general. But when it comes to DE&I, to help the organizations and the leadership carry out and implement policies that would benefit you and make this workplace more inclusive, you have to tell us. And so surveys are a very important piece. It's a very important piece in driving our DE&I program.
So in this survey that I put in the form link in the chat, it has the opportunity to be part of one of the committees, one of the main committees, engagement, communication, and data analysis. It also allows you to just answer yes, no, or maybe on being part of the DEI surveys that will be going out. So you do not have to participate in one of the committees to answer the surveys. We would like to have a good amount of people to send these surveys to, so we can get that information. So if you are interested in being a regular person that would respond, please put your name down on that. That would be extremely helpful for us.
Thank you, Julia. You buttoned that up really well. Are there any questions in general? So this is where we reserve these for really having a conversation and having chat. When you attend these meetings via cellular phone, then we don't get the option of taking surveys, etc. Sorry, Vigil. But I know you're Vigil, so I can also reach out to you after this and have a little 10, 15 minutes talk about it. And thanks for at least sharing with us that you're having that kind of a challenge. I'll ensure to reach out to you. And I see Sarah. Go ahead, Julia, please.
Oh, as I say, if I may, if there's somebody on the phone right now that would like to participate or like to get the link to the survey or anything like that, please feel free to send Ken or me an email, or both of us. We'll get that form link out to you, and that way you can complete it too.
Awesome. And then there's a question from Sarah, which I think is really good. Sarah says, and this is Sarah Hernandez, she says, do we need supervisor approval before joining a committee? Yes, we do. The committee is asking that you spending an average of 2 hours a month. And so it's important that your supervisor is approving for you to take off time out of your job to participate in the committee's work. It can also be a source of employee growth. Participating in these committees exposes you to doing work that you otherwise may not be doing in your unit, right? For example, if you're not really fully involved in PDCAs and you're part of the engagement committee, you may really have a great opportunity to try your hand on how we manage PDCAs, how we participate in PDCAs. So it's a great learning opportunity as well, but we want to make sure it's aligned with our ADOT, already functioning ADOT, by making your supervisor know, or allowing your supervisor to approve before you get in there. And Amelia Espinoza, you said, yes, I would like to respond to surveys. Great. So make sure you fill that form. The reason is that to be able to continuously reach out to you, we need to have a database that indicates who is interested and who is not. And then Ogio says ADOT response to Title 6 right issues. Yep. Is DE&I an extension of that? Well, we try not to, and I will reserve this question. Just if I had any of the people with civil rights in here, I would have reserved that for them to answer. I know that DE&I work relies on every part of the organization, but Oh, good. So we have Lucy in here, and so I'll let Lucy answer that. Lucy, go ahead, please, and thank you for jumping in.
Oh, you're welcome, Ken. Thank you. So no, it is not. The DE&I initiative has nothing to do with, not nothing to do with the Civil Rights Office. Obviously, we are part of the committee, but the regulations that are followed by Title VI, internal EEO programs, Title VII, and or any of the civil rights programs are not necessarily tied to the DE&I initiative. So that's why Ken Forbin is the manager, or who is admin, or the head person working on this. They are completely, not completely, but they are different. Obviously, non-discrimination is something that the Civil Rights Office works on. We follow the regulations and we follow the law, whereas the initiative really is something that it's an aspiration type of a goal, and not necessarily anything that is regulated.
Thank you, Lucy, and thanks for jumping in. I'm glad you were in there to help clarify that. And by saying we work with all, again, it means they're separable, but we benefit from an existing structure at ADOT. So thank you. I'm curious about how ADOT plans on getting buy-in from operations personnel. I can see the benefits of D&I for office personnel. Please advise, and that's Jay Gomes. I think it's for everyone. If we talk about D&I, Jay, there is a piece that talks about employee relations, how I come to work. It's talking about the appreciation of our authentic self, bringing ourselves to work. It talks about compassion. And I can see I can see our operations team, and let me go back to your question again from operational personnel. I see a benefit. So I see that every single employee at ADOT, I was trying to make sure, Jay, that operations did not suggest maintenance or construction, but you're just saying operations personnel. Every single employee at ADOT, I'm sure, would like to come to an environment where they are respected. No matter where you work at ADOT, you would want fairness in promotion. Oh, go ahead, Jay.
No, I totally understand. I just wanted to clarify that, I was talking about field personnel, maintenance, construction.
Okay.
And I understand how it applies to them. I was just figuring it would be a good conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Jay. And you're really right to jump in and clarify. And I hope the others are actually seeing the angle you're coming from, because they're out there doing the yeoman's work. How does that apply to them? And I think they need that too, right, Jay? And I've spent some time doing gambas with them and doing visiting, but also even testing out certain projects with them. That respect is something important, and finding a safe place to be is also important. And we need that everywhere. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get buy-in. But if we find difficulties in buy-in, the good news is, using our ADOT's AMS principles, we would do humble inquiry. We would find out what is going on and find out ways to together come up with countermeasures. We all need a safe working environment, a place that we think is fair. So thanks again, Jay. Anyone else? Any other question? Oh,
Nothing yet. Oh, there we go. Deborah, is the concern related to access to email and how to reach them?
Deborah,
Deborah,
can
do you mean to, do you mind unmuting, Deborah?
Oh, the question was for Jay. Yeah, Jay, that's Deborah's question to you. Do you see concerns with our operations unit, difficulty in buy-in because of access to email or how to reach them?
I don't know if I'm going to have, well, actually, I do know I'm going to have trouble describing this scenario, but I do know that field personnel have different personalities,
Okay.
And different work types than office personnel. And so, they have access to email, but again, and I think it goes back to what you were explaining, Ken, about, and this is what I get to do in my job, using humble inquiry, doing the Gembas, going out in the field, figuring out how to apply DEI to my employees. So as far as no, so there's no concerns related to access to email and how to reach them. It's just it's a different world to live in. If anyone's been a frontline employee in the field, they would understand what I'm talking about.
And I do too by virtue of doing Gambas, you're right. And to the equity point, do we provide resources, the same resources for everyone? Or do we recognize that our frontline employees, especially those working in the field, are exposed to different kinds of challenges? Therefore, our attention to them may require a different amount of resources or different type of resources. So that's really an example where equity comes into play. That they're just not ADOT employees. They are also ADOT employees working in the fields, and sometimes they are a lot more helping out in traffic, and we have to protect and make sure they are out of harm's way.
Agreed. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions? Any more thoughts about how do you feel about DE&I when you hear what we just presented? What's your comfort level? What are your thoughts about the program at ADOT? Do you feel happy that ADOT is pursuing this? What are some of your thoughts? Remember, Javier said this is a safe place, so please share with us.
If I may expand on that just a little bit, Ken, while waiting for people to respond, we understand as we're putting this program together that some people are excited about this, some people want to learn more, and some people don't want this, and some people don't want to learn more, and that's okay. Knowing where you stand is what matters. Knowing that this is coming and understanding that it is coming is great to know as well, so you can be prepared for that conversation to happen. So we do want to hear about some concerns that you may have, and also what questions you may have in order to have those answers. So please do feel like you can ask those questions of us, whether it's now, later in a one-on-one conversation if you would like to, or something along those lines.
Great to say that. And your voice matters. The beauty of doing DE&I in an organization as compared to the society at large is that your voice matters. I was sharing with an individual at ADOT, if you have something in your community, you may have to vote when they're voting for the mayor of Goodyear before that is that your feelings or your thoughts are becoming, if at all they do. But at ADOT, by responding just to a survey, your opinion matters. By picking the phone and calling, your opinion matters. And it's about our culture. So we should take the advantage that this is to create the best place of work we want. And then Ruth Ford said, I think if more people truly understood what DE&I means, they will have no reason not to want it or feel threatened by the discussion. As a practitioner, I would tell you yes. But we have to do a good job in sharing what it is and making sure that there's no confusion of what it is not. Because I'm in the literature, and sometimes, insufficient information misrepresent what DE&I is. And if we don't put it in proper context, we may get off track, we may misinform. That is why the DE&I statement of the organization is important, because it defines for its people and anyone else what they mean by their understanding of DE&I and what they intend to pursue. So that's great, Ruth. Thank you. I think I saw one from Heather. Heather always has very brilliant ideas, so I must find it now. Here she goes. It's exciting. I think the more people learn about what's at the heart of it, we will all have a new perspective on offering respect and grace. And I said it, she ties respect and she ties grace. We cannot progress without grace. We're learning new things about how people feel. What are the intersectionalities of people's lives? It's a little intrusive, but that's the way we would care. And we would make mistakes. And if we are not showing grace, we cannot create safe spaces. Thank you, Heather. And then let me see one more. I have Julia says, as a recent college grad, I saw a lot of DE&I in school. Glad to see in the state government as well. Thank you. I'm happy to see that as well. 10 years ago, Julia, I shared with you, I was involved in a program with Volunteers of America, that's private sector, And after a while, I didn't hear much about D&I except when I wrote papers in school about it. So glad to see that we're turning in and the time is right. And then Mary says, I think this is great that you all are moving into this direction. It'd be good for all of ADOT. We want everyone on board. It'd be good for everyone. So thank you for your comments. Hope I'm not missing anyone, am I?
There's a lot of great comments, a lot of thank you for doing this. I would like to offer just as a couple different topics for future lunch and learns, and it's not something current. I know, Javier, you have a schedule going already, but we do have some individual conversations we've had about specific topics within the DE&I realm. Things about bias, understanding, compassion, and things along those natures. So always feel free to reach out to us and we can go dive deeper into one of those individual topics.
And to sweeten the deal to everyone, we are going to have a space on A.net where we intend to put place important information about D&I, including learning materials, including opportunities for you to ask questions and read frequently asked questions. So coming up in a few weeks, you would see we're going to have a spot, and please use it and reach out to us and let's have an exchange as we move along. All right. Now, when I see Anais saying something, I want to have her talk. Anais, do you have any comments about our Launch and Learn recording to share at this time? Oh, she doesn't
have a working mic at the moment.
Okay, well, let's use Javier because I know you and Javier are in lockstep. Whatever you say is what he's going to say. So, Javier, do you have any additional information about this Launch and Learn? What Anais just posted?
Anais was just trying to remind everybody that this recording will be posted on the Lunch and Learn website as early as Monday. So if you want to revisit any of the points discussed, you can visit that website and see the recording on Monday, in addition to every other Lunch and Learn that's been recorded in the past year or two.
Thank
And
you.
as for future Lunch and Learns, we always have a spot open for DEI topics, so keep an eye out for that. And it's popular demand will dictate whether or not how soon we have Ken and Julia back.
All right. Well, thank you, Javier. I think you can go ahead and close out now, Javier. Are we doing well with time? I would imagine this is time people are about to leave and go back. Is that correct? Do we have?
Yeah, we're just on time. If you can close out. And
again, thank you all. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Judah or myself. But we are also going to post on the website a link where you can also access, reach out to any member of the DE&I team to ask questions or to join. So have a wonderful long weekend and see you guys again. Thank you for your time and the questions. And thank you, Javier, for such wonderful production.